And welcome to Any Given Tuesday. We are your hosts, Evan Mercer,
Lee Johnson,
and Sanjay Prasad.
With only a few weeks left before we reach the big game, we're going to have a lot on our plate to talk about this week. But first, let's talk about what happened last week. And boy, oh boy, we had a plethora to talk about. Let's start with the big one. Vanderbilt over Tennessee 45-34 with a comeback victory 34-21 to win it all.
Yeah, going into this week, this is clearly the game throughout the country. There were no other rivalry games between historical powers that people cared about. This was the game that everyone was looking forward to.
The game.
Yeah, this was the game everyone was looking forward to, and Vanderbilt showed up. Kyle Shermer threw for 416 yards and threw 2 touchdowns. Ralph Webb over 100 yards on the ground, adding another 2 touchdowns for himself. The Vanderbilt offense is finally here, and our team actually looks good. This is amazing. I don't know how to feel about it. I don't know this feeling. We're good at football.
I know we're a debate show, but I think it's safe to say Vanderbilt is one of the top teams right now.
That's true. If we had shown this kind of stuff throughout the entire year, we'd be in the playoffs right now.
Tennessee jumped out to an early 21-7 lead, but we showed resilience. We battled back. We scored the last 21 points of the game, holding Tennessee to only 3 points in all of the second half.
So Derek Mason, he's good right now. He's on the good seat right now. No hot seat for him. Butch Jones, though, what do you think about him? Is he going to get fired? Do you think he's got another year? I don't know what to think about him right now.
Honestly, I'm not sure. This Tennessee team, same record as the year before, and even though they seem to have more talent, it seemed like they'd grown as a team. But then as the season went on, this team just collapsed in on itself, ending with a loss in its rivalry game to us.
I think Butch Jones has to go. He had high expectations this year. They started the season a top 10 team in the country, and they didn't only lose to teams like Texas A&M. They got destroyed by Alabama, and then they lost to South Carolina and Vanderbilt. He was supposed to be a playoff contender, SEC East winner. The SEC East was down this year. Tennessee still couldn't win it. Butch Jones needs to go.
I think he's a great recruiter, and the players seem to love him for the most part, except Jalen Hurt, who transferred after the loss to South Carolina. But I think they're going to give him another year. You know, he's 8-4, and if he can recruit well next year, he's got to replace Joshua Dobbs. That's going to be the one big mark. And depending on how well he does against the bowl game, I think, for me at least, he deserves another year. So at the very least, Vanderbilt can get another win off him.
Perfect. Then moving on to the Big Ten, we had, let's say, the second biggest game of the weekend with Ohio State beating Michigan 30-27 in a double overtime thriller. Now, this was a huge game. Number 2 versus number 3. What did you guys see from this?
Well, this is a hype game going in. This game had serious playoff implications, with the winner of this game getting a likely seat in the playoffs. And it was a very, very close game. JT Barrett struggled, and Michigan really looked like the better team for a lot of the game. Barrett only was 15 for 32, 124 yards passing, and an interception. But Michigan, they had a lot of costly turnovers, and they couldn't finish their drives. I think Michigan should have been able to win this game. If they played just a little bit better in the red zone, I think they win this game.
I mean, Wilton Speight, he threw a pick 6, and then he threw another interception, which set him up Ohio State for score again. So I think, they had the opportunity. They were up 17-7, and then Wilton Speight threw that interception, and it all went downhill from there. So I think this loss is on the Michigan offense. I think their defense held true, but offense could not perform.
Yeah, this was on the Michigan offense, and the OSU defense really made up for the offensive shortcomings of Ohio State early in this game. But then even at the end in overtime, the offense sort of found its legs again, with JT Barrett managing to pull off those QB run after QB run that the Michigan defense couldn't ever seem to stop. And that's really what won them the game, the offense. And while the defense helped them out, shored them up early in the game, I still think this offense deserves some credit for putting the game away.
What do you guys think on Jim Harbaugh's arguments that it was neither the offense or the defense, but the refs that gave Ohio State this victory? He was pretty mad in his post-game speech, saying his team did everything they could and that the refs were to blame for his team's loss.
I think he's referring to the spot, the 4th and 1 run against Ohio State. So for me, I thought he didn't cross. It's hard to tell, though, for sure.
Yeah, that was so incredibly close. They had already called it a first down on the field. I could see why they're just going to let the play stand. There was nothing to really overturn it. But he also could have been talking about a couple of the pass interference calls earlier that had just sort of not gone Michigan's way. Some of the calls seemed to only go for Ohio State. It was some interesting reffing.
I agree that there were some very questionable calls, but I strongly disagree that his team did everything they could to win the game. if you have as many important turnovers, they didn't do everything they can to win the game. They outplayed Ohio State for most of the game, but due to their own costly mistakes, that's why they lost, not due to the refs.
I mean, the 4th and 1 didn't lose in that game. The 15-yard run after that, that's what cost them the game. You can't give that up and expect to win.
Yep. All right, so let's head out west for our next game. We had 2 big Pac-12 games this week. First, let's start Colorado over Utah. They won 27-22, and this game was for the Pac-12 South title. If Colorado won, they win the division, and if Utah won, USC would win the division. So Colorado finishes this year 10-2, 8-1 in conference, and this is a great year for them. So what do you guys think about this game?
I love Colorado, man. They have a great defense, great offense, and Utah is no pushover either. So they showed up, and I think they're going to give whoever the Washington team a good push for the money. But I mean, Philip Lindsay and Stefo Lafau, the offensive double, that's hard to beat right now.
That's true. Although Colorado did finish 10-2, but I think that's at least a little bit to do with their somewhat weak scheduling. They did play a couple good out of conference teams like Michigan, but even in conference, the Pac-12 in general was pretty weak this year, and Colorado really preyed on that. They are a relatively good team, but I don't think they're going to be able to give Wisconsin as much of a challenge. Washington. As much of a challenge as you guys might think. I think they might keep it close for a little bit, but I think Washington's superior talent is just going to take this one in the Pac-12.
All right, well, let's talk about Washington then, because those were the 2 big games. Washington was in the other one. They played that in-state Washington rivalry game versus Washington State. Evan, you've been hyping up Washington State a little bit, but they didn't show up this game, with Washington taking it 45-17, and the Pac-12 North title with it as well.
I know. I thought Luke Falk and Mike Leach was the real deal, and I think they did show themselves for a strong winning streak for a while, but this game, they got exposed. I'll say it. They got exposed. I think Washington, they're the ultimate deal right now.
That's
Miles Gaskin, Jake Browning, the coach, Mike Peterson, it's the Washington show right now in the Pac-12.
That's true. The Pac-12 is Washington's conference. That combination of defense and offense is just so hard to beat. I don't think anyone's going to be able to do it, but for the Pac-12 championship, it's Colorado, Washington. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think Washington, they're a great team. Obviously, they had to slip up a few weeks ago versus USC, but they have a lot of talent on this team. It showed in the all Pac-12 team this year. They had 9 people on the first team's offense and defense combined, which is a lot. Jake Browning had another great game, throwing for 3 TDs, almost 300 yards. He's the Pac-12 Player of the Year. So I think they're maybe not a national title favorite, but definitely a contender.
Oh, yeah. They're going to get a seed for sure as long as they can beat Colorado. And we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah. And, yeah, this helped their playoff chances. It was absolutely great for them. And next, let's talk about those games for next week. And first is Colorado and Washington, the game that will decide the Pac-12 and a possible playoff spot. What do you guys think? Washington, Colorado, how's this gonna play out?
I think it's going to be a pretty close game, but I think Washington's going to pull it out. I think Washington has been the better team all year. They had that slip up versus USC, but overall, even though it's tough for me to say, I don't think Washington's a great team, but I do think they're better than Colorado.
That's true. Washington might not be a great team. But I still think they're a very good team. And in the Pac-12, I think they are the best team. Jake Browning on the offense consistently managed to put up great numbers against whoever they play, and their defense usually tends to limit teams to a reasonable amount of points that their offense can just take the game and outscore their opponent. So I'm really giving this one to Washington. I don't think Colorado has a huge chance at winning here.
Gentlemen, when we're in the top 10, I think all these teams are great. And I think Colorado, Washington, they're up there with the best of them. So you got a premier matchup on Friday night. If you're not doing anything else, tune into that game because this one is going to be one to watch. But I'm with you guys. Washington is the premier. They have the premier quarterback. They have a premier running back. The premier coach of the Pac-12. And there's not much you can do that. The only limitation I can see against this Washington team is they lost the 2 best defensive players, Azim Victor and Joe Mathis. And when we saw Joe Mathis go out, we saw the sack number decrease tremendously. So we're going to see the defensive line of Washington plummet a little bit. But I think considering how the rest of their defense is doing, we should still expect Washington to win. I'm all in for the Huskies.
The one thing Washington doesn't have a premier one is a premier win. So far, they really haven't beaten any elite teams this year. The best team they've played this year is probably USC so far. They lost to them. Would this give Washington that elite win? They need to be a great team. Or I guess you said they're already a great team. So Sanjay, do you think this would be a...
I still think they're a very good team, and I think if they do win this, it will elevate them to that next level. Colorado, while I might not think as highly of them as some other people, they are still a good team. They've only had 2 losses the entire season. They were a top 10 team. If they win this, they're very deserving of a playoff spot, and they should be called one of the best teams in the country.
Up next, we have Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. Now, this isn't a championship game per se, but technically it's for the Big 12 title. So we should still count this as a conference championship, if you will. But we got is at Oklahoma, and both offenses have been lights out. They got great quarterbacks, great running backs, great receivers. Anything on the offense, it's going to be NFL talent. So this one is going to be a tough one for sure, and I think it's going to be similar to the Syracuse-Pittsburgh game we saw last week, the score of a basketball game. So what do you guys think? What's your take on this?
I think we're in for a treat for sure. To have a rivalry game this conference championship weekend, be a de facto conference championship game because the Big 12 doesn't have a conference championship game. I think it's great. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma's traditionally dominated this rivalry, but it's still a pretty good, it's going to be a fierce game, I think. Oklahoma State has 2 losses this year, but one of them is due to a pretty questionable refereeing call that first week. So if it wasn't for that, Oklahoma State might be playing for a playoff bid. But as it is, I think a Big 12 title is a good enough prize for them, and I think Oklahoma State's going to take it.
That's true, exactly. For both of these teams, I think all they can really play for here is that Big 12 title, unless maybe some unlikely things happen in the other conference championship games. The winner of the Big 12 probably isn't going to make the playoff. But these are 2 incredible offensive teams, and this is the Big 12. Their defenses both aren't quite, good enough to stop either of the offenses. So this is going to be an absolute shootout. This is going to be Baker Mayfield and the Oklahoma offense just throwing for as many yards as he can try to. So honestly, I like Oklahoma here. Oklahoma State, while they have been good in recent years, they've been very good this year. I don't think they have the offensive talent to compete with that Oklahoma offense.
I'm with you. I think Oklahoma, they got the complete set right here. Baker Mayfield, Joe Mixon, D.D. Westbrook, potential Heisman candidate. You know, he's the number 1 receiver. Maybe Corey Davis from Western Michigan can give him a run for his money in terms of raw receiver talent. But D.D. Westbrook has the resume and the big team name to potentially be a runner-up for the Heisman. So I like this Oklahoma team, and I think they take down Oklahoma State easily, especially since it's at Norman, their home state, their home city.
All right, so despite Vanderbilt's win last weekend, they didn't bump them up to top of the SEC East, and they won't be playing in the SEC title. But Alabama and Florida will be playing in the Georgia Dome, last game in the Georgia Dome, for the SEC title. Alabama's coming in as a huge favorite, but they have Jalen Hurts as their quarterback. He's been playing well recently, and a Nick Saban coach team is always going to be a tough fight. Florida's looked pretty weak recently, getting demolished by Florida State last week. Do you guys think there's any chance of an upset, or do you guys think the Tide will roll?
No chance. Like Florida Gators, have you seen them against Florida State? I mean, even against us, they have no offense. Like maybe a decent defense, but I mean, they're a poor team all around. I don't know how they beat LSU.
Okay, I wouldn't go so far as to call them a poor team all around, but again, in that Florida State game, it looked bad. Their defense, there were some signs of light. Their secondary was playing great on the ball, forcing some picks, forcing some turnovers. But on offense, it was sad to watch. They couldn't move the ball. Their run game just got stuffed immediately due to this Florida State defensive line. And when you're playing against Alabama, it's just going to get even worse. I think this is going to be a pretty low-scoring affair on the Florida side. But at least it's going to be more a test to see if can Florida's defense actually do well at all against a top SEC team. And if they do well, at least that's a silver line to take out of this game. But this is just Alabama's game to lose. I think they're just going to sort of steamroll over this team.
All right, so since we think Alabama's going to dominate this game, for the last 4 games in all of November, they haven't allowed any touchdowns. Will that streak continue? It's the longest streak in over a decade. Will that streak continue? Will Florida get a touchdown?
No. Hands down, no. Unless they get like a pick 6. Is that possible for Florida? I don't think so.
It could be possible for Florida. I like that secondary and I like the defense. They're not scoring an offensive touchdown. I'm just going to say that right now.
All right.
It's going to be interesting.
Let's talk about a more offensively favorable matchup. Clemson versus Virginia Tech for the ACC title. Now, obviously Clemson, we saw them lose only once to Pittsburgh. Other than that, they've been pretty good, 11-1. They beat Louisville, a seemingly top team, before they lost to
Kentucky.
Kentucky, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a top team, and I think Virginia Tech, for me, they're a great offense and an even better defense. So I think Virginia Tech has a possible upset here. What do you guys think?
I think Clemson's going to take this. Clemson should be very motivated for this game. If they win this game, they're going to go back to the playoffs again, and they have a chance to win the national title. I think Clemson has more talent, and in a regular season game, maybe they're not going to play up to their full potential, but I think in this ACC title game, Clemson knows if they win this game, they're making it. If they lose, they're not. So I think Deshaun Watson, he's had an up and down season. It's a good season, but he's had some valleys in it. I think he's going to play great, and I think he's going to lead Clemson to at least 40 points in a victory.
That's true. Throughout the season, Deshaun Watson he's had his low points. But again, last week he was great against South Carolina. And this week, where there's actually something to play for Clemson, a possible playoff bid, a possible chance to repeat in the repeat appearance in the title game, I think this team is going to play fantastically. During the season, they've played close against a lot of teams they shouldn't have. But now that there's Dabo Swinney should get his team fired up. He should get them motivated. And a motivated Clemson team is something scary to look at. And I don't think Virginia Tech can compete with that.
I'm sorry to say it, but I think Virginia Tech can beat Clemson here. It's a neutral site. Gerard Evans, the top JUCO transfer, he's been on fire this entire season. Sam Rogers put up a couple touchdowns against Virginia last week, and he's proving to be a decent running back for Virginia Tech. And their defense is one of the best. I mean, they shut down North Carolina 34-3, one of the top ACC offenses. And I think, for me, Virginia Tech, it's going to be a close game. I say 37-34, but I think Virginia Tech pulls it off. They won't be in the playoffs, but they'll be the ACC title winner.
Interesting, because Virginia Tech, their defense, it's looked good against certain teams. Like North Carolina, they are a good offense, but they're not one of the best offenses. And I think a Clemson team that plays well is one of those top offenses in the country. And I don't think Virginia Tech, while they have a decent defense, I don't think they're going to be able to compete against Deshaun Watson and the rest of that Clemson offense. It's going to be interesting.
I think if you're a Clemson fan, I think it's very troubling that they have or if you're a Virginia Tech fan, sorry, I think it's very troubling that they have 3 losses despite having a very weak schedule. I don't really think they're going to beat Clemson when their third best win this year is probably Notre Dame.
Well, I'd be concerned about Clemson, too. They lost to Pittsburgh. They only beat NC State because their kicker was complete garbage. 3 missed field goals from 20-yard, 30-yard range. I mean, Clemson is not the powerhouse they were last year. Deshaun Watson has been prone to turnovers. Mike Williams and their running back, they haven't been doing anything. They haven't been doing as well. And I think, for me, Virginia Tech, with their defense, they exposed the turnover problem, and they take the win here.
That's true. It's going to be interesting to see if Clemson's problems were just due to a lack of motivation in the regular season, or if it's actually just this team isn't quite as good as that team last year. But next, we go to the Midwest, where Wisconsin takes on Penn State for the Big Ten Championship. And this is going to be interesting because it is for the Big Ten Championship and maybe some playoff consideration. So these teams are playing for a lot. What are you guys thinking?
I think this game is going to be interesting. The only thing more interesting than is what the playoff committee will do depending on what happens. But let's talk about the game first. I think Penn State's probably going to take it. I think Penn State beating Ohio State, between these two teams, that's the most impressive. Penn State's win over Ohio State is the most impressive win in the country so far. I think Ohio State's the second best team in the country, and Penn State beat them. It was at home, but that's very impressive. Penn State in the beginning of the season was not the team they are today. I think Penn State now would be favored over any of all teams but maybe 5 in the whole country. Wisconsin's lost the 2 biggest games they played this year, and I think they're going to lose now the 3rd biggest game they played this year.
That's true. Wisconsin has already lost to Michigan and Ohio State, and while Penn State, they've only played Ohio State.
No, they played Michigan. They lost by 39 points.
Oh, Lord.
But they've changed since then. They're a new team.
I'll agree with you. They have gotten much better over the season, and that I do think Penn State has a good chance of winning this game. I think that their defense, and especially that defensive line, can absolutely crush this Wisconsin offense, which already hasn't been doing great all season. But it's going to be interesting to see how this Wisconsin defense how this Penn State offense and this Wisconsin defense match up. I think if Wisconsin can slow down the offense and maybe limit the yards, force some turnovers, they have a good chance at this game. But if Penn State's offense plays like it has against maybe Ohio State or how it's played in the latter half of the season, I think they can take this.
I know it's a sin to say this around here, but I think James Franklin has proven himself to be a very good coach. And 10-2 record with a win over Ohio State proves that. Losses to Michigan is not a 39-point loss to Michigan is not very promising, but that's 8 games ago. Tracy McSorley, the quarterback, and Saquon Barkley, the running back, they've been tearing apart the Big Ten defenses. I don't think it stops against this Wisconsin defense. You know, they have a great defense. We've seen that. And I think they'll struggle some about it. But I think they'll put up points, maybe 17, 20 points. I think their defense will be able to absolutely shut down Wisconsin offense. Nittany Lions, they have to win here.
So, what do you think? If Penn State wins this game, do they deserve to make the playoff?
In my opinion, I think a conference championship is worth more than a win, or like a
good season, but no conference championships.
Yes. I think Penn State, the losses were 8 games ago. And I think with the win over Wisconsin, win over Ohio State, I think they should be in over Ohio State.
That's going to be by far the most difficult decision this playoff committee will have to make. You have Ohio State, a team that did incredibly well and talent-wise is one of the best in the country, but they aren't in their conference championship, and the team that could possibly win has beaten them. I think the committee has said it really favors those conference champions, and I think if Penn State wins, they're going to get in over Ohio State.
All right, I have an argument here. You're saying Penn State should be in over Ohio State because of head-to-head? Sure. Michigan versus Penn State, they both will have 2 losses. Penn State will have the championship, but Michigan has a 40-point win over Penn State. Does that not matter, getting blown up by 39 points?
Like I said, that was 8 games ago. I think they've proven themselves. They're an elite team now. I think if they play it again, Penn State takes the win.
That's true. Lee, even you said yourself, this team has grown over the season, and I think now the Penn State now is much different than Penn State at the beginning of the season. And honestly, Michigan, they did beat them, but again, they aren't conference champions. They did lose to OSU. I think Penn State would still probably get in. It may not be quite the correct decision, but I think it's what the committee would do.
All right, wait, real quick. I have another thing to say about this Penn State situation. Why couldn't it be both Penn State and Ohio State? If right now the committee, they've released their rankings tonight, they had Ohio State as the #2 team in the country. Why would Ohio State be the team that gets dropped just because they're in the Big Ten? Could it not be, say, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Penn State?
Because we have Washington. There'll be a Pac-12 championship if they win. Let's assume they win. They'll only have 1 loss to a ranked team, USC. So Washington, I think, will have at the end.
Yeah, again, it's mostly due to the fact that Ohio State isn't a conference champion. Assuming all these games do shake out the way people expect them to, with Alabama, Clemson, and Washington all winning their respective conferences, I think it's likely that you have Penn State as the Big Ten champion in there instead of Ohio State, who do have a very good record and a good team, but no championship.
Is the only team that feels safe right now Alabama?
Pretty much.
If they lose,
Yes.
are they still in it?
I don't know. They're not going to lose.
Yeah,
There's no way they
honestly can't. I haven't considered that possibility, but I think they still would.
Yeah,
I think they would get in. They would get in over, say, Ohio State. They'd both be 1-loss teams, and honestly, both their losses would be to ranked teams. And I think Alabama has shown themselves to be the better team over this season.
It's a lock. I can't see it. I've run the math. 0% chance of them losing to Florida.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bold prediction, but yeah, it's really going to be interesting to see how if either Clemson or Washington loses, we could have 2 teams from the Big Ten in the playoffs. It's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out.
All right. Anything else you guys want to talk about tonight?
Well, let's go do the special segment, okay? You know, we talked about Vanderbilt a little bit, their offensive and defensive incredible movements over the last 2 weeks. So let's do a quick review of the season, discuss it a little bit. Derek Mason, Kyle Shermer, everyone on the Vanderbilt offense, the Vanderbilt team, really. So beginning of the season, we started out rough. We lost to Georgia Tech badly, South Carolina 13-10. Things were looking pretty bad, but then we came to Kentucky and we lost to 2013, a bottom seller just like us.
Yeah, on the show, we ranked Vanderbilt the lowest team in all the SEC, and you guys, not me, but you guys both called for Derek Mason to be fired.
That's true. We all, we called for Derek Mason to be fired. All of us thought that maybe Andy Ludwig and this offense had to be revamped. But then we see at the end of the season, this offense finally shows some life. Kyle Shermer manages to air the ball out, throw for a lot of yards, manages to limit his turnovers. And this running game, which has been good all season, finally gets to shine due to a new passing threat. And that really adds an entire new dimension to this team that we originally thought would just be good defense, bad offense, won't really go anywhere. So it's really nice to see some growth in this team.
The breaks just started going for us towards the end of the season. A lot of these games in the beginning of the year were very close that we lost. In fact, of the games we lost, of the 6 of them, 5 of them were easily winnable by less than 10 points. Not saying that we should be an 11-1 team, but we played 11 winnable games this year. Against some of the best teams in the SEC, we played them very close. Florida and Auburn, we had the ball driving with a chance to win the game. and we didn't win those games, but our luck turned around a bit towards the end. And not even just luck, these last 2 games, we just played great. We didn't need luck to beat Tennessee or Ole Miss. We just outplayed them.
Can we talk about Kyle Shermer a little bit? I mean, at the beginning of the year, he looked questionable. But this Tennessee game, he made some incredible throws to Caleb Scott, Trent Sherfield. We had 2 over 100-yard receivers, and Kyle Shermer was just hitting everything. I mean, just look at this screen. We're blowing apart the Tennessee defense by large
That's a beautiful ball.
Yeah,
right
exactly.
there.
It wasn't just that our receivers were making plays. This man was making some great throws, leading his receivers, and letting them get just some scores and some great yards.
I mean, this is just incredible. I think we have the quarterback of our future. He's going to stay for another year at least, and I think Derek Mason has to make the most of it.
Absolutely. Again, before he did go as a promise, but now he finally seems to have taken that next step, become a very reliable passing threat, and it's going to be really nice to see next year how we can do with again, a good running game and a good passing game to complement our good defense.
I think our offense is definitely going to be improved next year, at least from what it was at the beginning of this year. We might be losing a lot of talent to the NFL, which is always unfortunate, but if we can hold on to this performance we've had these last 2 weeks, I don't see any reason why we can't win the SEC East next year.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, Derek Mason, he's been on fire this week, all these weeks. We beat Georgia, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. 3 SEC wins, the most he's ever had. 6 wins total. I mean, from 3 wins the first season, 4 wins the next one, 6 wins. I expect it to be 9 wins at least next season.
And with that 6 wins comes bowl eligibility, which means not a great experience for the players, more practices, which should help us be even better for next year.
Let's take a little bit. Let's look at what Derek Mason had to say about after the Tennessee game. I mean, he had some inspiring words, and what he said.
Let's let him speak.
I'm so excited for these seniors. You know what? They did this. We did this. People said we couldn't get it done here at Vanderbilt. Well, I tell you something. You better feel the beat, because we're back in this place. We are back in the house. Yeah!
And what can I say? And my 26 seniors, unbelievable. We talked about it. We talked about in order to do something unbelievable, we had to play unforgettable in the second half. But tonight, man, the Commodores were the better team.
Garvey, this is our state.
Most points in the SEC game since 1971. You know, I mean, I'm proud of this group because at the beginning of the year, you know, everybody talked about how we couldn't move the ball, we couldn't score points, we couldn't, you know, do much. And all we've done these last 2 games is pile up points against pretty good competition or good teams. So I'm so proud of this offense, needing to play better in the second half and not give up any points. Okay, so we gave up 3. I'll take that. I'll take that.
So that's the other side of the spectrum. Oh, my.
That's the kind of coach you want to win for you. He's passionate. He's dancing on the sidelines when you get a big win like this. And you know, he said it right. The Commodores were the better team that night. You don't hear that often, but that night.
We're going to be hearing that often from now on.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully. Although he will have some challenges next year. Again, we're going to lose some talent to the NFL and some seniors due to graduation. But it's going to be interesting to see if he can develop those players, keep this momentum going of these last 2 amazing wins. So I personally think he'll manage to do it. This offense will either stay how it is, which is still very good, or even take another step, become even more of a threat, and hopefully our defense, while it may not be quite as good as this year, will still be a formidable foe to face for our SEC opponents, and we have a very good shot at winning the SEC East next year.
2 notes. I hope so badly that Zach Cunningham, our star linebacker, stays for this next year. And 2, I'm so happy to be a Commodore. We're winning football games now, and I think that's all you need in life. Well, that's all we have for tonight. This has been Any Given Tuesday. We'll be back here next Tuesday at 7 o'clock Central Time. This is Evan Mercer.
This is Lee Johnson.
And Sanjay Prasad.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you next week.
Thank you.